Good evening, America. Tonight, Iran's parliament speaker and chief nuclear negotiator, Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf, went on Iranian state television and announced something that should make every American who has been following this war stop and pay very close attention. He announced that IAEA nuclear inspectors, the United Nations watchdog specifically charged with preventing countries from building nuclear weapons, will not be granted access to Iran's damaged nuclear facilities under any circumstances. Not eventually, not after a final deal, not with special protocols, not ever, under any circumstances. He said this is not a negotiating position. It is the law. Iranian parliament passed it. Iran's Supreme National Security Council ratified it. And those two institutions together under Iran's own constitution have the binding legal authority to make that ban permanent, regardless of anything the Iranian president signs with the United States. The three specific sites he named as permanently off-limits to any inspector under any circumstances are Fordow, Natanz, and Isfahan. Those are Iran's three most important nuclear facilities, the same three sites targeted by American and Israeli bombs. And somewhere at those three sites, or somewhere near them, underground, in tunnels in undisclosed locations, is Iran's stockpile of highly enriched uranium. According to the International Atomic Energy Agency itself, that stockpile is large enough to potentially build as many as 10 nuclear weapons. Not one, not two, 10. Nobody knows exactly where it is. Nobody can verify what condition it is in. And tonight, Iran's own parliament speaker has declared that nobody is going to be allowed to find out. Stay with me. Because tonight reveals the single most dangerous, unresolved question of this entire 124-day war. Let us start with exactly what Ghalibaf said, because his words deserve to be heard in their exact form before we examine what they mean. Speaking on Iranian state television on July 1st, Ghalibaf said that IAEA inspectors will not be granted access to damaged nuclear facilities under any circumstances. He specified the legal basis for this ban. It is not a preference. It is not a negotiating opening position. He cited two specific legal instruments that bind Iran's government, a law passed by the Iranian parliament and a decision ratified by Iran's Supreme National Security Council. Under Iran's own constitutional structure, those two instruments together carry an authority that supersedes even the presidential decisions that produced the memorandum of understanding that Trump and Pezeshkian signed just 2 weeks ago. He said access is restricted only to two specific sites, the Bushehr nuclear power plant and the Tehran research reactor. Both of those sites are undamaged civilian research and power facilities that were never the subject of military strikes. Neither of them is where the highly enriched uranium stockpile is believed to be stored. And then Ghalibaf dismissed all previous American claims that Iran had agreed to nuclear inspections as lies. He said the reports of expanded inspection concessions are falsehoods. He signaled a rigid baseline for upcoming talks. No concessions beyond the current domestic legal framework. The IAEA ban on damaged sites stands. The law is the law. This directly and explicitly contradicts Vice President J.D. Vance's statement from just days ago. On Monday, June 22nd, Vance stood in front of reporters at the Bergenstock Resort in Switzerland and called Iran's agreement to invite IAEA inspectors back into the country a major milestone for the American people and the first step in permanently denuclearizing Iran. Tonight, that major milestone has been publicly called a lie by Iran's own chief negotiator and parliament speaker on state television. This is the same pattern this channel has documented repeatedly throughout this process. The United States announces a breakthrough. Iran's government denies it. Both governments described versions of reality so different from each other that only one of them can possibly be true. And the American public is left with no independent source capable of verifying which version reflects actual reality. That is precisely why IAEA access to these sites is not just a diplomatic question. It is the foundational question on which every other aspect of this peace deal's credibility ultimately rests. Now let us bring in the IAEA chief himself, because IAEA Director General Rafael Grossi responded to this entire dispute from what might seem like an unusual location, a press conference at the tsunami-damaged Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant in Japan. but Grossi's message was anything but soft. He pushed back against both Washington and Tehran in the clearest language he has used throughout this entire conflict. He said the memorandum of understanding, signed by both presidents, leaves no room for ambiguity. He read the agreement's own language directly. The accord, he said, says explicitly that the nuclear activities that are going to be carried out with regard to the nuclear material facilities will be supervised by the IAEA, in all letters. He added, obviously, to do that, we will have to inspect. Whether this happens the day after tomorrow or in 1 week or in 10 days, it is important, but not essential. This is going to happen. That declaration from Grossi, this is going to happen, is being read as a direct institutional rebuke of Iran's parliamentary ban on inspections. Grossi's agency has previously warned most explicitly in a press conference in Seoul just months ago that IAEA involvement is not optional in any meaningful nuclear settlement. He said at that time, without inspectors, you will not have an agreement. You will have an illusion of an agreement. Tonight, that illusion is taking visible shape in real time, with the IAEA insisting inspections are mandated by the signed text, and Iran's own parliament speaker insisting they are banned under domestic law. These two statements cannot both be correct. And until one of them yields, there is no verified nuclear deal. There is only a piece of paper with two signatures. Here is the specific nuclear picture that makes this dispute so genuinely alarming, and not just as a diplomatic abstraction. The Islamic Republic of Iran is believed to store enough highly enriched uranium to potentially build as many as 10 nuclear weapons. That number comes from the IAEA itself and was confirmed in multiple reports this week. Iran is the only country in the world to have enriched uranium to 60% purity without a declared nuclear weapons program. Weapons-grade uranium requires 90% enrichment or higher, but technical experts confirm that a nuclear explosive can be made with concentrations of 20% and above. Iran is at 60%. It is enriched to a level well above the 20% threshold and only one technical step from 90% weapons grade. The IAEA has separately confirmed it observed regular vehicle movement in satellite imagery around the entrance to an underground tunnel complex at Isfahan, where uranium enriched to 20% and 60% is believed to be stored, and has stressed the urgency of gaining access without further delay. That language, without further delay, was published before Ghalibaf went on television tonight and declared that access will be denied without any circumstances and under any circumstances whatsoever. Now let us bring in Trump's own UN envoy, because his reaction today reveals that the nuclear inspection crisis is already being escalated beyond the executive branch into the United States Congress. And what he is warning lawmakers is the kind of statement that changes political dynamics around this deal. Matthew Leiter, the Trump administration's representative to the United Nations, issued a statement that was pointed enough to generate immediate attention. He said, "We all support President Trump's vision of ensuring that Iran no longer has nuclear capabilities, ballistic missiles, or the ability to funnel money to its proxies to threaten its neighbors and maintain its regional hegemony." He then asked the question that cuts to the heart of the frozen assets controversy this channel has covered extensively. How do we ensure that these funds do not find their way to Hezbollah? And then he answered his own question in the most alarming way possible. He said, "If we cannot guarantee that, then all the words we agree to here will make no difference because Hezbollah will simply rebuild itself. If we cannot guarantee that the frozen funds do not reach Hezbollah, all the words we agree to here will make no difference." That is Trump's own UN envoy speaking to members of the United States Congress, saying that the central financial mechanism of this peace deal could become the primary funding source for one of Iran's most powerful and most dangerous proxy forces, the same Hezbollah that has killed more than 3,600 people in Lebanon since March 2nd. The same Hezbollah whose Deputy Secretary General called the Lebanon Framework Agreement a surrender just last week. The same Hezbollah that has rejected every ceasefire term and vowed to stay on the battlefield indefinitely. Trump's own UN envoy is warning Congress that the money being released under this deal could rebuild exactly the force that has prevented this peace from holding in Lebanon from the very first day the memorandum was signed. Let us also bring in Iran's chief negotiator's own characterization of this deal, because Ghalibaf made a statement this week that is as significant as his ban on IAEA inspections and equally deserves to be heard directly. He said, "The Islamabad Memorandum of Understanding was not the result of pressure and coercion, but rather the result of the resistance and authority of the brave Iranian nation." And then he said the sentence that has now been published by every major outlet covering this story. He said, "That is why the Islamabad Memorandum of Understanding became a declaration of America's defeat." A declaration of America's defeat. That is Iran's chief negotiator, the same man who has been sitting across from or alongside Qatar's mediators in Doha, describing the agreement that Trump called a very good deal, that Vance called a classic Trump deal, that the White House communications director called historic, as a declaration of the defeat of the United States. And he said this not in a private briefing or a leaked document, but on the public record in a formal statement broadcast through Iran's official state news channels. Iran is not shy about how it is presenting this deal to its own people. It is a victory, declared loudly, over the country that launched 900 strikes on Iran on February 28th. Now, let us go back to the Arms Control Association analysis, because the expert community's assessment of what this nuclear inspection ban actually means for the overall deal deserves direct attention tonight. Daryl Kimball, executive director of the Arms Control Association, published a detailed analysis in March 2026, before the deal was signed, warning explicitly that Trump's approach to Iran's nuclear program was chaotic and reckless. He noted that the IAEA has not been able to access any of the bombed sites or to account for the nuclear material, which is a violation of Iran's safeguards obligations. He said it is clear that it would take Iran years to fully rebuild its enrichment plants and months to enrich small amounts of uranium to bomb grade. But he also said, in language that is directly relevant to tonight's story, that while there is no imminent threat from Iran's nuclear program right now, the absence of IAEA inspectors means that nobody can verify the current status of Iran's stockpile, whether it is being moved to undeclared locations, whether centrifuge manufacturing is continuing in dispersed facilities, or whether Iran is positioning itself to move rapidly toward weapons-grade enrichment if it decides the political moment calls for it. None of those questions can be answered without inspectors on the ground at Fordo, Natanz, and Isfahan. And those three sites are now banned under Iranian law from any inspection under any circumstances. There is one more piece of context from tonight's news that ties this nuclear story to everything else happening in this peace process. Iran's foreign minister Abbas Araghchi was reported this week to have spoken with Bassem Naim, a member of Hamas's political bureau, about the latest developments in the region. This detail, reported by Iranian state television, is not incidental. Iran's top diplomat is discussing the U.S.-Iran peace talks with the political leadership of Hamas at the same moment that Trump's own UN envoy is warning Congress that the frozen funds released under this deal could rebuild Hezbollah. Iran's regional network of partners and proxy forces is not a separate issue from this nuclear negotiation. It is embedded inside it at every level. Here is the complete picture as of tonight, July 2nd, 2026, day 124 of this war. Iran's parliament speaker and chief nuclear negotiator declared on state television that IAEA inspectors are banned from Fordo, Natanz, and Isfahan under any circumstances, calling previous American claims of inspection agreements lies. Iran holds enough highly enriched uranium to potentially build 10 nuclear weapons stored in underground facilities that no inspector has accessed since the 2025 war began. IAEA Chief Grossi insists the MOU explicitly requires inspections, and they are going to happen, directly contradicting Ghalibaf's parliamentary ban. Iran's chief negotiator publicly called this deal a declaration of America's defeat. Trump's UN envoy Matthew Leader warned Congress that frozen funds released under the deal could rebuild Hezbollah, saying all the words we agree to here will make no difference if that guarantee cannot be made. The IAEA observed regular vehicle movement around Iran's underground Isfahan uranium storage complex, stressing the urgency of access without further delay. and 28 days remain in the 60-day negotiating window. America, here is my question for you tonight. Iran just banned nuclear inspectors from the three most important nuclear sites in the country under any circumstances forever, calling it a matter of domestic law that cannot be overridden by any signed agreement. IAEA Chief Grossi says the MOU explicitly requires inspections, and they will happen. Iran has enough highly enriched uranium for potentially 10 nuclear weapons, and nobody knows exactly where it is. Trump's own UN envoy is warning Congress the frozen money could rebuild Hezbollah, and Iran's chief negotiator called this deal a declaration of America's defeat. With 28 days left in the 60-day window, do you believe a final deal is still possible? Or do you believe the nuclear inspection ban Iran just announced tonight makes a real, verifiable, lasting peace agreement impossible? Drop your answer in the comments right now. Subscribe and turn on notifications. 28 days left. And the most dangerous, unresolved question of this entire war just got harder.